Hey guys, welcome and thanks for joining us in this conversation. And no doubt you might be as excited as I am to delve into such an important, topic conversation. And like natural disasters, we also experience a variety of incidents in cyberspace that can have a varying degree of impact on our lives in many different ways, depending on how prepared we are. And we have seen this in many, many occasions. And one of the well known and often discussed is ransomware, simply because ransomware is going nowhere anytime soon. And there are many reasons why. And one of the major reasons has to do with the profitability for the bad guys, as they would say. And so, theoretically, many of us know and also understand what a ransomware is. And in some instances, we might have done, for example, our tabletop exercises. We have well documented playbooks, and the list goes on. However, there is a huge difference between being in a situation, knowing what to do, and just having an understanding, that theoretical understanding of what is required. Example, many people are able to define what a ransomware is, but when it comes down to actually dealing with that situation, then it's a total different ballgame. So today I have two expert guests. For those who are actually on LinkedIn, they might be familiar with these guests. Stuart Ebdon, and he's a managing director, also IT leader and cybersecurity advisor at Ebdon Limited. And we also have Chris Woods, who is the founder and CEO at CyberQ Group. So you definitely want to get in contact with these guys and to connect on this platform. And they will be helping us in terms of addressing the realities of a ransomware attack. Now, I recently did a post on LinkedIn that goes something like this, and this is just a ransomware scenario. You have just been hit with ransomware, and all your files are encrypted. And the options that we have, what's the first step you should take to recover? Is it to pay the ransom, disconnect the infected systems or devices, notify law enforcement, attempt to decrypt the files yourself? So these are some of the options. And no doubt you would have seen these scenarios before. So I just want you to bear this in mind as we uh, go through this conversation. So, Stuart, Chris, guys, thanks for taking the time out to join us today to provide us with all the wonderful insights.
No problem. Thank you for thank you. Looking forward to being here and looking forward to discussing such an important topic.
Okay, great. Okay, so guys, to get things started, Chris, can you uh, just share a little bit about what you do, and also um, followed by Ebdon as well.
Yeah, sure, no problem. The funny story actually, I used to start my career working with Stuart at Fujitsu. Me and Stuart have been in probably the cyber security scene now. Probably we are that old now, Stu,
I was going to
30
say, I think
years.
over 20 years, mate. Over 20 years.
Yeah, 20, 30 years. Funny story. My first job was working for a company called Fujitsu and straight after university, which was great. So I was there for about 7 years and then went to a kind of another company called HP, Hewlett Packard. So I ended up being the cybersecurity director of that organization and building cyber capability across the globe. And then kind of got approached to go out to the Middle East. So again, where you are, Richie, I went out to a place called Qatar or Qatar. So I was over there for about 4 or 5 years, basically working at the Qatar Foundation, building cyber capability and defence grade, as they call it, kind of cyber capability for the government over there. And then I came back to the UK 2016, 2017, and kind of opened CyberQ Group up really, which is a global business, basically looking after enterprise to kind of small SMEs really around their cybersecurity. So we've got a lot of experience in this space, and obviously we've got the kind of latest intelligence and latest threats that I'm happy to share as we go forward on this webinar. But Stuart, hand over to you, my former colleague.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Chris, and good to see you this morning. Yeah, Richie, thanks for having us on. As Chris said, I think it's probably true to say that Chris and I were getting involved, and I certainly was at the sort of dawn of thinking about cybersecurity. We've been starting to build IP networks for a while, and through the 90s, and obviously a bit before that. And people were getting worried about firewalling and attack and all that kind of stuff, and reducing those threat vectors. So I think compared to now, we had a very simplistic view because that's all we could have, and the tools were quite simplistic back then compared to now. But we learned a lot there, and we also knew that there was a definite threat, and it's been good to sort of be involved in the capability as it develops over the last 20 years. But sadly, with any capability that develops, so do the people that are attacking you. And so one of the reasons for sort of having this call today is to try and sort of explain some of the challenges you might hit during that, which is good. But yeah, so after meeting Chris in the early noughties, I think it was, I was running the network management center for Fujitsu stroke ICL at that point. Did another number of other management roles for Fujitsu. And the last sort of 15 years or so been involved in government and defence networks from a cyber, but across the whole IT, including the internal network side as well. So gain a lot of experience, and it's great to be here today to actually try and share some of that, but also hopefully give some people some direction as well, as to there are a lot of resources out there now, and there's a lot of good companies doing good things to help you to protect yourselves. And sadly, to coin a phrase that's going around a lot at the moment, it's not a matter of if you will be attacked, it's a matter of when now, sadly. And your preparedness will define how long you are impacted for. So it's a key topic for us to be doing.
Okay, great. Definitely. Now, before we actually delve into our scenario at and one very important thing that came to mind is has to do with the fact of, I mean, any one of you can actually attempt to delve into this. Do you think, based on your experience, that is? Because at times I don't have that impression, because I think this has become a cliche sort of a conversation or a overused, I mean, topic. Do you think ransomware is being taken seriously? If yes, why or why not, based on your experience?
I think I'll answer that with some of our clients, really, just kind of jump in there. I think if people have been hit by ransomware and if people have had a cyber incident, then they take it very seriously, because obviously the damage that causes, obviously kind of reputational data. And I'm happy to go through what a ransomware attack looks like as well, which probably may explain it. So there's a lot of the kind of medium to enterprise organizations do. And ransomware is just part of attack. If you leverage, if you go up a couple of levels, you're really talking about risk to the business, and ransomware is just one. And most organizations we talk to do take the cyber risk extremely seriously and look to defend it. But there's other risks as well, Richie. So it's not just the ransomware. There's other access to data. There's other access or means of vulnerabilities that can be exploited, which all comes under the category of risk. So most organizations that, I suppose that's a cliche really, because most organizations, being a cybersecurity company, if they weren't serious, would engage us. But yeah, in my humble opinion, they do. I think where there's gaps, I think is in the smaller end, in the SMEs, which make up the majority of businesses in most countries. I think sometimes they're busy just trying to get on, and security for them could be not really top priority, and they may kind of overthink it, but kind of ignore it to a certain extent. There is a lot of pressure, especially in the UK government and actually in the UAE and the Middle East, to get companies at a certain level of security, because it's in every government's interest to have, a secure internet or a secure place to do business. So there is a lot of regulation, there's a lot of compliance now, especially in the UK, also in the US, where actually people can go to prison. So you've had a recent case literally a year ago where they had a particular breach, the breach wasn't notified correctly, and when they came to do the investigation, they found that not everything was what they said it was, which then actually put this individual in prison. So again, the government's doing a lot that they can to try and kind of improve cybersecurity resilience for all businesses, not just the medium and the large, really. Hand over to you, Stu, really, for your thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. The thing I was going to impress upon really was with regards to ransomware attacks in particular, one of the things on the to-do list was to potentially get insurance for someone that could pay out, or at least help you to pay out if you were attacked. Now, as Chris said, one of the things you get is not just a financial impact, but can be a brand and reputational damage. And no amount of money can sometimes help you out with that. That can kill you off almost overnight. So it is something that I think is getting taken more seriously now as people see examples of ransomware attacks, people paying ransomware attacks. And a good example in the States recently with a health provider was that they were attacked. They paid the ransomware sum, and then I think it was within 2 or 3 months they were then asked to pay another sum, because of course these ransomware attackers, they are criminals. They haven't got any. They'll keep coming back for more if they think they can get it. So you do need to be very careful now, and just getting an insurance policy out is a very, very small sticking plaster on the large problem you may have. So.
Yeah, I mean, and if I can, it may just be worth going through a bit of a ransomware attack and just to say, because some of the experience, because what we see, we've just literally done an incident response about a week ago. The ransomware attack. Well, the first thing I should say is that cybersecurity and physical security, in my head, is the same thing. So when we talk about physical security, we talk about cameras, we talk about gates, we talk about locks. Most people can have a fairly decent conversation about that because they can understand where the weaknesses is in a building or a site. Cybersecurity is exactly the same. The only difference is the terminology that we use. So as we have big gates, we may talk about firewalls. Where we have cameras, we will talk about security operations centers, etc., etc., etc. So it's really a good way for the audience just to kind of visualize that cybersecurity and physical security is the same. It's about protection and it's about reducing risk. Now, going on to ransomware, what we tend to see is that's the kind of petrol bomb attack. And what I mean by that, it's the last attack that they do. What we find is when hackers have got access to an organization, they tend to do two things before they do a ransomware attack. The first thing is a common one with business compromise email. So they will hack an account, and let's say they hack the finance account. So the first thing they'll try and do is manipulate the invoices to try and get the invoices paid somewhere else. And they'll do that for a time X being weeks, months, years in some cases, where they won't do all the invoices. They'll just do the odd few and find out how much kind of traction they can get. The second thing they do is then go after data. So again, the whole point, the whole kind of phrase here is what they call dwell time. So dwell time is the amount of time that the attacker is in the network. They'll look for data. And that data could be financial data, it could be customer confidential data. They'll try and find data that they can either sell, they can sell to their competitors, they can make any leverage out of it. So that's the kind of second attack. So the first attack is taking access to the account. Second is what else can I find? And then the third one we find is once they've been caught. So let's say that the supplier will pick up the phone and say, you haven't paid the invoice. Could you double check? And they find that something's wrong. They tend then to go with the ransomware attack, which then is a very simplistic attack, really, which is encrypting all the devices and then asking you for some bitcoins for you to get the data back. They're the steps that we tend to see where they want to go in quickly, and depending on how good the defense is, how quickly they're spotted, they could do all that within an hour, or they could do all that within 2 years. And it really is depending on how well that organization is prepared, how well that organization is detected, and also a bit of luck. They may get lucky whether, their customers will say, well, you've sent me an email, you shouldn't have sent it. So a bit of luck can basically come into this. And I think one of the things for me, getting hacked attacked isn't embarrassing. So an organization that's been compromised, okay, you've been compromised, that shouldn't be embarrassing anymore. What we should be looking at is their response. So once you have an attack, once someone's in the system, how quickly did you respond? And there are three things really. One is the technical capability. So have you got security operations centers? Have you got a plan, a cyber response plan? Is all your team doing that? Have you done cyber simulation? Then the second is the legal, because depending on the size of the organization, you may need to talk to your supply chain, clients, etc. So you need some legal kind of coverage there. And thirdly is PR, public relations, where own the message, because if you are attacked, they may publish your company details on the dark web, on Twitter, etc., or on X now. And how do you respond to that? How do you control the message internally to your employees? How do you control it to your suppliers? And also how you control it from your customers as well. So hopefully that kind of sets the scene, Richie and Stu. And Stu, you've no doubt got lots of experience to add to that.
Yeah, and I think one of the frightening things that I would add to that in the main, Chris, is that through experience, a lot of customers don't really think it all the way through. If they've had an attack or they're having one, they're learning. But not many customers actually take themselves on a journey through a virtual attack, shall we say. And the value in doing that, a bit like a disaster recovery, which is normally physical and team and organizational. We've been doing disaster recoveries in large organizations for a while now. But very rarely does it sort of touch on, okay, specifically for a cyber attack, what is the activities we need to carry out to survive that disaster? And I think that's the extra education that we need to bring into the market. And that's certainly one of the things I know, Chris, that you do with your customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is step them through that, and you've given us some of that. And it's I think a lot of it as well is when you are stepping through something like that, you're not just talking to the IT team. You have to talk to the wider business. A bit like disaster recovery. Disaster recovery should also be across the whole business. So you've got administrators, you've got managers, you've got directors, you've got HR. Everybody should be involved, the finance team. And when you do a cyber simulation test, the same thing has to happen. It can't just be the IT team thinking about what they're going to do at an IT level. In fact, the IT team have probably actually done a number of steps to that anyway, just in their general management of the environment. So it is definitely a company-wide activity. And hopefully that's becoming more easy to see, because as we see examples of disasters, you can see that, well, the IT systems might be affected, but all of the business processes have been affected as well. So I don't know, recent examples in the UK, one of the blood banks couldn't issue right bloods, so surgeries couldn't take place. So that's a recent one in the UK. So again, the surgeries have got nothing to do with IT, but it impacted it. And so you have to involve everyone. You can't just sort of say, oh yeah, we did something, tick, IT team know what they're going to do. That just isn't enough. And it just shows how, on a positive note, IT systems are allowing us and supporting our businesses to thrive. But while they can thrive, they can only thrive while it's safe. And we need to know either what we're going to do when we get attacked, or look at what we're going to attack, find our vulnerabilities, and then put extra things in place to protect ourselves. So that hopefully that attack has a lower impact.
Sure. Very, good points. I've actually been involved in maybe not a wide scale cyber attack, but cases where an organization file has been encrypted via, business email compromise. However, one of the things I find is that it's always good to sit to have the meetings, the discussions, the planning. But when the event actually takes place, then I recognize that, for example, in organizations that have been in before, there are fire drills, there are training. And when that fire alarm goes off, then you're supposed to be doing X, Y, Z. But you find that people is almost like, oh, it's just a casual activity. People doing their own thing is almost like they do not care, because simply because they do not understand the overall impact on the organization from a governance perspective, down to the fact that it will affect even the salary that they earn per month. So, how can you actually help an organization to develop that roadmap in which you have that comprehensive integration between all the entities in that organization, where when and if this event does occur, then everyone is on board. They understand what the roadmap and the end game is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm happy. Do you want to go? Yeah, I mean, there's two things there really. And you're absolutely right, Richie. I think, and it's a Mike Tyson. I love my quotes. It's a Mike Tyson quote. You both have heard it before. Everybody thinks they've got a plan until they get punched in the face. And I think if there's anything that kind of epitomizes, personifies kind of cybersecurity, it's that, isn't it? I think we all think now we've got a plan. We all think that if it happened, we'd be all right and the communications. But obviously, in an attack, there's lots of different things that happens. There's your customers may get on the phone, your suppliers may get on the phone. We dealt with an incident response about a year ago, and their biggest supplier cut them off, which means their business stopped. So their biggest customer was kind of 90% of what they do. And then once the supplier found out, they cut them off because they were scared of their kind of organization being, so they were pretty much out of business. And when you have that amount of pressure, which, let's be honest, the attacker wants to get the friction. The attacker wants to make the board scared and worried because you're going to act irrationally. And again, that's one of the key things that threat actors do. But there's two things, going back to your question, there's two things I think makes a real difference. Cyber simulation is probably the first one. Cyber simulation is literally going through an attack. Now, like you say, it's like a fire drill. You can't just do it once and think, oh, I'm done. It's literally, things will change, landscapes will change, your business will change. So having a cyber simulation once every 6 to 12 months really stands the board up in good stead. And what that is that's going through different scenarios. So different scenarios of attack. And that attack could be a ransomware. It could be an insider threat. It could be an external vulnerability. It could be a supply chain. And it's basically going through the reactions of what the board, with the appropriate technical team, so, CyberQ Group or whatever, how that works and how that communication plan comes together. How does the investigation, the analysis come together? How does the legal come together? Now, that's really, really powerful. Takes about a day, half a day to really go through it, but it has some massively powerful results. And like your fire drill, Richie, it gets you prepared. So when the real thing happens, like Stu alluded to, you've been through it. You've been through the drill. You've been through the contacts. You've been through your plan. You've been through how the war room's gonna come together. Who's gonna say what? Who's gonna do the investigation? And you're prepared. And going back to the point, preparing and having that response is absolutely fundamental and key. Because that's what companies should be judged on, not getting hacked. They should be judged on their response to deal with that attack and to get back to business as quickly as possible. So a cyber simulation, again, is one of the key things that we do with organizations, especially if they're on that kind of journey of just understand, well, what does happen? And we make that as real as possible. And so should any organization in regards to that. You've got a Sky News knocking on the door or a news channel knocking on the door. Why is my data on the dark web? Why didn't you protect it? Right the way through to speaking the same language. When you talk about lateral movement, mimikatz, and it's like we're speaking in a Klingon. And how does that actually react to the board members? So again, it's even the simple things like communication. So, well, what does that lateral movement actually mean? What does mimikatz as a piece of software actually mean? What does that prove to us? What does that show to us? So again, Campbell is simplistic about making sure we all speak the same language and the type of attack that it is. So that's the first thing. So again, cyber simulation. The second thing I would say is kind of a cyber maturity assessment. So most organizations need to understand where they are. It's a bit like, where am I as a bar? Am I good? Am I bad? Am I in between? What's my weaknesses? What's my strengths? And I think the second thing I would prescribe is a cyber maturity assessment where ultimately it grades that business. And it grades that business to say, well, actually, you're really, really good, which is great, well done, or you're not so good, and here's the weaknesses you need to improve on. And then, right at the bottom where you really need to get a handle of this. And that cyber maturity assessment should cover all areas, not just incident technical. It should cover like even down to social engineering and how does your employers, how do your organization to do that. I think we see the biggest improvement with them two services, more so I would say than the other services, and more so than a penetration test, more so than a security operations center, threat intelligence, vulnerability management, because what them two actually do is they get everyone, going back to your point, Richie, they get everyone aware. So the board going through a cyber simulation understands why this is important and understands what they need to do. Cyber maturity assessment, I know where I am on a baseline. I know what I need to improve on. I know what weaknesses are. And you have a plan on the back of that. You have a strategy on the back of the cyber maturity plan. And then the other services just help keep that under control, help improve that. But they're the two that we see that I think customers off the bat get the most value for money: the cyber maturity and the cyber simulation. Stuart, I don't know if you want to add anything to
I
that.
was, what I was going to do is just reinforce what you said there with regards to when you go through those activities with the board, with the number of staff, and quite a lot of the time you need to involve quite a lot of staff, because one of the things you said, Richie, was that when some of these things happen, some people, they almost, maybe it's because of panic, but they become complacent. They go, well, I can't do anything, hands up in the air. Oh my God. But if they've been through a cyber simulation, they've actually, oh no, hang on, when we did this, I know that I can carry out these activities. I've got the board that are going to do something there, so I'll get information here. All of a sudden, although the real thing is happening, you're in a much more informed position as an individual, because you kind of, oh no, right, I know I'm going to get support from above. I know that my team and me are going to work in this kind of way. And therefore it's a completely different thing for, I guess, the individual as well as the organization. So we shouldn't underestimate the value that these, let's say, dry runs can give to an organization. Because in the end, and I think you hinted towards it, Rich, at the end of your question, if the cyber attack isn't dealt with in the right way, so like Chris was saying, you can show that you have done the best that you could do under the circumstances and you've responded to this cyber attack, threat, whatever, in the best way, then as an individual member of the team, maybe it will affect your salary, maybe it will affect your job, maybe your job doesn't exist anymore because the company has gone under. And I'm not saying that to scare people, although it might scare some. It's reality. And so in actual fact, doing this kind of activity does help to protect you. And I'd say take notice and take as much of it as you can if you do one, because when the inevitable happens, you'll then be prepared, and then the best outcome will therefore be delivered. So yeah, just to reinforce it, Chris, really, I think it's now that it's become real, now it's become a matter of when, not if. We all need to be ready.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I mean, sure. I totally agree with all that have been said. I mean, having those simulations, I believe, are very, very important in terms of creating that level of preparation. But one of the things I think that actually, I mean, I just love to hear your guys' thought on it, is that there has to be a particular leadership in all of this in terms of actually creating that culture or that mindset in terms of actually preparing for not just ransomware, but just about any, I mean, cyber incident that will occur in an organization. So, I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of having that individual who actually knows how to create that cohesion and that culture in that organization? Bearing in mind that there are various types of industries and organization, and the capabilities of one organization varies from another. You have large entities, small entities. So all of these factors can and will affect the way in which an organization actually respond or is able to deal with this type of situation that can occur in an organization? I mean, not certain if the question is clear though.
No, I certainly get you. I'm pretty sure I get your question. I mean, it's with regards to the kind of people that need to worry about it. I think a bit like in everyday life, if we take you as an individual, you have an amount of data which is private to you, and people are even trying to get hold of that. You know, people will send you a text message, an email, and they'll try and compromise you, maybe to get access to your bank, etc. And so I would say it's all the way from an individual who's just trying to protect their everyday life and their data around that. And as soon as you run a business, if you're not worrying about that business in the same way that you're at least worrying about yourself and your own data, then you do need to you do need to do something about that. So I think what I would say is you worry about yourself in your own life, your private life. If you run a business, you need to worry about that. So it has to come from the top. If you're in an organization where you don't think the top is worrying about it, I think you need to actually make noises. I think you need to sort of say, look, this is something that we should worry about, and maybe we should do something about it. And then maybe take some small steps initially to try and discover more about that, try and discover how it might affect the organization. And then build on that, and then from there it may well be, yes, well, perhaps a cyber simulation service will allow us to get behind that, work out what we can do, or maybe we just actually need to learn more about our risks, because some small organizations, they'll have bought a suite of products probably to help them to run the IT side. They maybe haven't got an IT department, but they still will need to look at that and maybe take a sort of a bit of consultancy if they haven't got the skills in house. Hasn't got to be thousands and thousands of pounds. It's sort of a bit of a point thing. Find out what the risks are, and then decide, right, okay, can I live with those risks, or do I need to do something more? And Chris, I know you've got a lot of experience with working with both the smaller companies and some of the larger ones, and some of the, I think, globally as well, because it's thought about differently, isn't it, in different parts of the world.
Agreed. No, completely agree, Stu. Kind of, I think your points there. I mean, I know we've got a couple of questions there, but just to answer that quickly, Richie, we talk about culture and building that. I suppose that's kind of where you have the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, really. I mean, maybe an organisation is not as big for that, so they have to have other security leaders within the business. And I completely agree with Stu. If there's not a plan, if there's not something in place, then organisations, should have something. All sides of organisations, be small organisations to kind of enterprise. Really, it's kind of pretty key that you should have a plan. Mindful of the questions, Richie, that's just come out. Happy to kind of go through them.
Sure.
Should we take the first one?
Not certain if you're actually seeing all the on LinkedIn, if you are able to see all the content of the question.
Gotcha, because I think he's on the chat there. So the first one, how can organisations balance the ethical consideration of paying ransoms against the potential for future attacks if they do so? So I can answer that quite quickly, because if you're UK government, you don't pay the ransom, because if you pay the ransom, a bit like with any business, they generate more money. As they generate more money, they're going to employ more people. More people's going to do attacks. Now, it is a multi-million, maybe I've heard billion actually, but I'd need to confirm that kind of a business. But one has to be kind of understanding of actually, if you do pay the ransom, what that actually means. But in the UK government, if you're a government entity or a supply chain, the kind of remit is you can't pay the ransom. Secondly, kind of a CyberQ Group would be don't pay the ransom. Thirdly, if you're a business that's on its knees, and we've been through a few of them, it's a really tough decision for them to make, because ultimately there's two things. One, they have to convert the Bitcoin, so they have to get Bitcoins. Usually that's the payment that they're looking for. Was the payment that we kind of have seen over the past. If a business has got no other alternative, and as Stu alluded to, would go bust, then I absolutely can understand. But there's two considerations. One consideration is these guys are criminals. So if you pay them, what are the chances you're going to get the keys back? Now, I will give you my own opinion on that. Most, and again, this isn't telling people to pay, but most organisations that we've dealt, or criminals that we've dealt with, because sometimes we do the comms on that, do send the encryption key. And because they're so good, they actually send you a certificate as well. I mean, people think I'm joking when I say this, but they send a certificate saying they won't come after your company for 12 to 24 months because you've paid the encryption, you've paid the fee. So you can have a certificate that they'll honour. Honour among thieves. I know this is ridiculous, but to say that if you've been attacked then by this particular ransomware gang, then they won't come after you. And then secondly, there has been, I think it's small, and I haven't got the figures at me, but there's been small where people have paid the ransom. So that could be anywhere between £100,000 right the way up to 4 million, 5 million. And there has been some more in regards that they don't give you the encryption key. Now, bear in mind, ransomware, very, very simple. It's not doing anything particularly clever. All it's doing is encrypting your data. The difference is they've got the key and you haven't. So to unlock that data, you need their encryption key to do that. And there has been isolation to do that. So question one, ethically, I wouldn't pay the terrorist, or I wouldn't pay the organized crime, because that's a bad thing. You know, if you are on your knees, that's a hell of a tough choice for the board. It really, really is. And you know, you have to be very clear about what you're doing. So that's my humble opinion about question one. Stu, Richie, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that.
And I just add, though, going through a cyber scenario and actually having the board think about that before they're in a real situation, very, very valuable, because you can actually, so all the things that Chris was mentioning there, you can talk through all those, and the board can get their heads around which ones are very large threats, which ones maybe are a little bit smaller, and have an idea as to what steps they might take, or what might push them towards paying it, not paying it. But yeah, ethically, I think the answer is no. And I think I gave it earlier on. There have been examples where people have paid. I don't know if the example I've actually got one of these certificates that Chris mentioned, but they paid, and then a few months later they were asked to pay again. And it wasn't paying to actually. So at that point, it wasn't a ransomware attack. They didn't actually encrypt the data again. They just said, "Oh, by the way, all that data that we stole, we'll post that on the dark web," and that was data about all of their patients, etc. So yeah. So I believe they did pay again. Just to, yes. So, and it is It's a $1 billion industry. Ransomware attacks is $1 billion.
It is
Absolutely.
Thanks, Stu. Yeah, I was going to say, Richard, I don't know if you've got anything to add. I'm happy to get a question too.
Oh, sure. I was just saying that the issue of pay or not to pay will always be a very, challenging, thing to deal with as an organization. It depends on the value of the data, your ability to pay. So that's always been to me a rabbit hole. Sort of a situation in terms of that's a whole different conversation that could take hours. But it goes back to me in all of this. It goes back to preparation, preparation for the organization, not so much thinking about, well, are we going to be, for example, breached or act, whatever the case is. Time to respond, time to discover how much will it cost. That being in that position, regardless of what is at risk, looking at the risk, developing that risk posture for that particular organization, having everyone on board, planning for the necessary impact is actually what I believe actually puts that organization or that business in a better perspective to actually address all that can or will happen as a result of such an event. Guys, I'm not certain if there are any final points, but before we actually put a wrap on this conversation, what are the main challenges when it comes on to, possibly you would have mentioned some of these, but what are some of those main challenges that organization will face when it comes on to preparing for a ransomware and ways in which they can actually deal with these challenges?
Okay. Richie, there's a second and third and fourth question as well, Richie. So
Yeah.
happy to go through that as well. So on the
Okay, sure.
second question is, in the event of a ransomware attack, what immediate? So we can go through these questions fairly quickly, guys. I think in the
Okay,
event of a
sure.
ransomware attack, what immediate steps should be taken to isolate the affected systems and prevent further spread within the network? So just quickly, because this is kind of what we do incident response. The first thing is to find out how they got in. So again, I'm going to go back to a physical security example. How did the criminal get in? Did he come through the window? Did he come through a door? Did he have the keys to the door? Did he climb over a fence on the back? That's pretty fundamental. So if you know the attackers in the network, your first question is, you must have known somehow. So you've either seen something, you've heard something, you've had an email from your supply chain. You may have a security operations center, which would be really, really good. Basically, these are the kind of things that you need to find out quite quickly. Once you figure out the door that they got into, you can then start to bring the technical team to isolate it. So again, what we call containment. So you have two phases: containment, which is contain the attack, do the investigation, look at the logs, look at the lateral movement, how they're getting. That's probably maybe a little bit technical. And then the second thing is eradicate. So once you've done the containment, you then eradicate them. So eradicate them obviously from your network or from a user account, but also make sure that they don't do anything, so they haven't opened backdoors, because that's also what we see, is that once they've got access to a system, they know that they'll probably get picked up at some point, so they then have other backdoors. So that's one of the forensic logs of going through what did they actually do, how did they do it, etc., etc., etc. So that's quickly question 2. There's question 3, question 4 as well. But Stu, do you want to add anything to that?
And I was just going to say that one of the key things for all of this is you need to think about this when you're not under attack. A bit like we're discussing it now. This is, a nice free-flowing conversation. If we were actually under attack while we were having this conversation, it would be very different, and our judgment may be impaired. So it was just to basically reinforce that Chris obviously talking from experience there and taking us through the steps, but you need to take yourself through it before you're under attack.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to think of the quote though about preparedness is better. Prevention is better than cure. That's the quote. So I think we all absolutely don't wait to get attacked. Do a lot of work prevention, and then you're in a good shape. When it happens. So the third question then: how can an organisation conduct a thorough risk assessment to identify vulnerabilities that could be exploited in a ransomware attack? So this goes back to what I alluded to earlier, was the cyber maturity assessment. The cyber maturity assessment, there's different, I think there's kind of different levels of that. So you may be familiar, like we're 27001 certified organization, which tends to be very policy based. And then you get other things like CIS, which is the Center of Internet Security, which is probably more technical focused, but obviously policies in there as well. They're the frameworks that one can use to really get a good understanding of the risk within your business, basically. So from that perspective, it's worth looking at that, and it's worth doing that cyber maturity assessments, which will help you identify from a framework perspective where your risks are in your business. When you talk about vulnerabilities there, I mean, that's a great question, but it's not only the vulnerabilities, it's things like joiner and leaver policies, it's things like incident response plan, it's things like threat intel. It addresses a lot of different types of risks for your business. And that cyber maturity plan just basically gives you a good baseline that you can then build upon, and you can create a strategy on the back of that. So that's how I would do to answer question 3. Stuart, I don't know.
Totally with you, mate. Totally with you. And again, it's do it now, not when you're under attack.
Prevention. That's the kind of call.
And if you go to somebody as well and get advice and guidance, then they can point you towards the places you should look first. So, go and get the help. It'll take half the time.
Agreed. Yeah. Go. I absolutely agree. Yeah, get the professionals. What they measure twice, cut once. So again, I told you I like my quotes. But again, yeah. So make sure you get a cyber maturity assessment, because that will give you a good baseline. Question 4: what legal implications should organisations be aware of when deciding when to pay a ransom, especially regarding compliance with regulations like GDPR, CCPA? So I've already alluded to that, so I might hand over to you, Stuart, and Rich here. You may have the up-to-date knowledge in the Middle East, but as I said, the UK government mandate you do not pay the ransom, and their supply chain, you do not pay the ransom. So there is a legal is it legal? I may be speaking out of turn there, but there is a liability that the UK government say don't pay. The GDPR, especially in the UK, obviously you have 72 hours to inform the ICO. So should you be attacked, should you have a ransomware attack, then you have to contact the ICO basically to let them know, and that's in kind of 72 hours. The Middle East, I'm not sure of. When I was over there was some kind of legal. The US, I think they're operating a very similar model as well. Stuart, I don't know if you know any more on that, really.
No, but apart from I know the guidance from the UK government is don't pay, and there won't be support if you do. With the likes of GDPR, DORA, all these sorts of things, they're a series of steps you have to take to make yourself as protected as possible. One of the conversations I've been having with clients who are looking to do that is, you might decide to not implement some forms of technology due to cost. But the fact that you maybe know that form of technology could protect you from something else, then at a later date, in a court of law, where a lot of people are now going if they haven't done the right steps, in a court of law, you could be held to account. So if you know about a type of technology that could protect you, and if you were being attacked, but you choose not to use it, that's a business decision. It may impact you negatively. So you've got to be very careful in that way as well.
Agreed. And I think there's a final question there. What technology or tools are pros and most effective in detecting and preventing ransomware attacks before they cause significant damage? To quickly to there is obviously a security operations center, or it's MDR kind of being mentioned, but anything that detects suspicious activity in your network is very much like CCTV. So having CCTV in your network enables you then to spot kind of any suspicious activity, which basically means you can respond quicker. And also, because you have a security operations center, you'll be collecting all the data and all the logs, which will mean that you can react quicker because you'll understand how they got in, where they went. When you're trying to do that without that, it can be very hard. It's quite looking through logs and trying to find out where he came from, or he or she, sorry, I should say, came from. It can be quite a laborious task, really. So, security operations center, and there's a plethora of software tools, and that's probably for another day, that claim they can stop ransomware and so forth, and some of them are really, really good. And I think the concern there, or the challenge there, is staying on top, because ransomware has adopted over the last 15 years, and it will keep on changing. So the tools and technologies that you've got today may need changing in X, Y, and it's looking at that holistic. So it's how does all these technologies come together to give you the best possible view that you can possibly have. And for us, having that security operations center, having that kind of visibility really helps get a return on investment, because it ingests all the security tools together to give you that principal view about what's happening in your network. So that's my point on that. Stuart, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, nothing more to add apart from, again, you need to go through and maybe stepping through a cyber attack and what may occur may allow you to then reflect on the tools you have and find any gaps. So, it is very hard. And when you do find gaps, then sometimes maybe there's elements of that cyber service that you need to outsource to other people to carry out for you, because some tooling is not cheap. Whereas taking a managed service that can utilize that more expensive tooling could be a way of actually allowing a small business to get the benefits of the tooling without actually having the high investment of the tools themselves.
Agreed, absolutely. Cool. That, I think we've answered all the questions there, Richie, and we probably went through the two. And I'm mindful we've got 8 minutes left, I think.
I think so. No, just to add to all that you have been saying so far, I mean, quite on point there. I mean, just to make one thing clear is that it's dealing with ransomware or just about any cyber incident. It's more of a strategic approach rather than thinking of a particular tool. As I mean, at the end of the day, there's no single, as they would say, silver bullet
No.
tool that can actually address all of these situations. It's having that holistic, strategic approach, defense in depth, zero trust, all of this built in into your overall program in terms of preparing for these incidents that can occur in your organization. So, guys, I mean, are there any final thoughts or advice or tips that you would want to possibly share as it relates to, I mean, preparing
Yeah,
for or dealing with ransomware?
yeah. I'd say, and well, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but preparedness is key. Involve people outside the IT organization, and if you are outside the IT organization, don't be worried that you don't understand the IT, because in actual fact, a lot of things that come from a attack, any kind of cyber attack, they're going to impact your business in certain ways. And so you can think about it at the business level. Let the IT guys worry about then what IT will do, but think about it from a business point of view. Don't think, oh, it's IT. I'll ignore that. Actually, no. Listen, if you've got a CISO, if you've got a CIO, whoever you've got in there, if you've got a CTO who maybe looks after that organization, or even if you've got an IT manager, whatever you've got in place, listen to them. Initially, try and turn it into a business problem as opposed to an IT problem, and then start from there. And if you want advice and guidance on how to make those links and what you should be worried about, both from the IT side and the business side, then you can get companies in to help you out with that. But I think I would severely suggest don't do nothing. Nothing now is not the right thing to do. So, Chris?
Completely agree, Stuart. Really, I think you've got prevention's better than cure. I think the key thing is for any business to really understand their risks and can literally make sure that they've got a plan to deal with that, so incident response plan. I think the two things I would say, what can organizations do today if they are in that situation where they're, let's say, figuring out what their security landscape looks like, they don't really understand risks, they're trying to get a grip on this cyber thing. I think definitely the simulation, the cyber simulation with the board is one of the key in the cyber maturity assessment, so they can build a strategy. That is before anything, I would say, because out of that, they can build the plans, they can build the technology. As we've seen with previous organizations, just buy tech in the hope that it will solve problems. They don't look at it holistically, and they can end up wasting a lot of money and not really getting a good return on investment, not really getting the buy-in of the board. And by starting with the cyber simulation and by starting with the maturity assessment, it really helps. And I think obviously prevention's better than cure, as Stuart, again, it's not to be a broken record, but it's true. Don't let the first attack be your first, oh, we should have figured this out earlier, because that just is it's never a good place to be. Make sure that you have a plan, make sure that you have experience, you have a team around you that can deal with that. And I suppose the final point that I would make is that sometimes cyber gets caught up in IT, and it's the IT guys who've got it in the IT guys, be internal team or external team company, are busy doing the availability, busy keeping the lights on. They're not usually dealt with cyber attacks, or they've not usually dealt with cyber security expertise. So it's not an IT issue, which I think some of people may think it is. Cyber attacks are a board issue. It's a business issue. So it needs to be treated by the business as they would treat any other big risk. If they run out of cash, they wouldn't say that's a bank problem. It's the bank's fault that I've run out of cash, so the bank's going to fix it for me. If a business run out of cash, it's because of they haven't spent it, they haven't had the financial understanding of what was happening. That's no different to cyber. And I think most, especially in the Western world and the Middle East, people are understanding that a little bit better, that actually cyber is a business issue, and it has massive impacts as regards to an IT issue, where if the IT goes down, okay, you may be irritated for an hour or two or whatever, but it won't damage the company. Well, it going to be thesis there, may, but it's not compared to a cyber attack as well. So, yeah, my lasting message really is that cyber is a business issue, not an IT issue.
I mean, guys, we could go in so many
Directions.
different directions as it relates to this conversation. This is something that I'm always passionate about in terms of, and I guess all of us are passionate about in terms of helping our organizations, our businesses to be at a level to deal with these, I mean, challenges that do exist. I mean, but I could not say it any better than you have rightly said, Chris. All of those, I mean, important points, not to mention you as well, Stuart. So if there are no, I mean, final thoughts, which I mentioned before, then I mean, to me, I believe that this I've actually learned, I mean, a lot from you guys as well, and I mean, no doubt our audience have actually gained a lot of value from this, so that they are now in a better position to pretty much understand. And you will not understand until, I mean, God forbids that you're actually in an actual situation. But I guess the takeaway is to be prepared, as you have rightly said, Chris, to do your simulations, do your risk assessments, know where you are and where you need to go, doing those gap assessments. And you should be in a better position as it relates to actually dealing with the realities of a ransomware attack. So, guys, it was indeed an awesome conversation. I mean, thanks for taking the time to share with us today. And that's it from us here. I mean, until we meet again for future engaging conversations at this. So, guys, I mean, do enjoy the rest. And as usual, be safe.
Yeah.
Cheers,
Thanks,
Richie.
Richie. Thanks,
Thank you.
Stu.
Cheers,
Speak to
guys.
you soon. Take
Cheers.
care.